Back on Get Up on a day filled with huge news from around the world of sports, including NCAA President Mark Emmert saying the NCAA will not mandate a uniform return to college sports. That means the decisions on when to start playing again will be up to state officials and university presidents. Meanwhile, the SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey was on with Paul Finebaum yesterday, walking back prior comments he had made suggesting the SEC will play regardless of what everyone else does. Here's a bit of that.
I was asked a question, and I think if the entirety is played, I spoke when this flared up of the connection between the Autonomy 5 conferences being likely stronger than I've ever experienced. We're speaking every day. But even more importantly, our schedules are connected. So the notion that one lightly thinks about going off and doing something in an independent way is actually not attached to reality.
There's a lot here to dive into, and Paul Finebaum and Laura join us here this morning, along with Swagoo. Paul, this was from your show yesterday. How should we read Sankey, to some degree, walking this back?
I think, in fairness to Sankey, he has been consistent, Greeny, on dealing with the other commissioners. Obviously, at the SEC office, that's the power base in college football. So I think he was really trying to clarify some misstatements out there or misinterpretations. But in the end, I do believe he will go with he wants drafting partners. I know I'm sounding NASCAR-esque here with Swagoo and Laura, but that's what he wants. He does not want to go alone. Now, I've had many conversations with Sankey because the SEC would look terrible going alone, and I'm not sure we'll even get to that point. But right now, I think they're all in this together in terms of the ACC, the Big Ten, and the Big 12. The Pac-12, who knows where they are right now, other than maybe nowhere. Yeah,
we're going to get to that piece of it in a second. But first, Laura, what do you make of the situation now with Greg Sankey and the SEC?
Yeah, you know, Greeny, I think as Paul said, this whole time, Sankey's been very consistent in what he's wanted. And at the end of the day, it's that they have time on their side and that they want to play football in the fall. Whether that means it has to be pushed back a little bit, which we've heard, as we've talked about on this show, maybe an October start date, maybe an October model. Now, look, what they would like to do is just start the season on time. And there have been plenty of signs that they might be able to do that, even if that doesn't mean that every single school in the conference could start on time. And I think that's where a lot of these individual schools are also teaming up together in these conferences, having conversations, trying to figure out how they can, in some way, shape, or form, get a college football season in place. And so that's really where Sankey's been this whole time. And at the end of the day, they're all going to have to protect themselves. So whether that means Greg Sankey protecting the SEC, whether that means, you know, Bowlesby protecting the Big 12 and so on and so forth, that's what you're going to see. But they are going to try to come together in some sort of unified Power 5 thing. But I think that's the most important point in all of that. The Power 5 may be unified. Who knows about everything else?
Okay, so now a couple of other things I really want to get to here. Laura, you've been talking to a lot of players, I saw in your notes. What are you hearing from the players?
Well, I just wanted to get their perspective on this because, look, at the end of the day, they're the guys that are going to have to be out there playing. And, you know, I wanted to, out of respect to their privacy right now, not use their names, but just to give you guys a gist of where they're coming from. Everybody that I talk to wants to play. These guys find their identity in playing football and playing college football. They made commitments to go to these schools for a variety of reasons, but a lot of them have to do with the fact they actually wanted to play the game. And even some really high-profile guys. I talked to one who said, look, I know that I'm taking a risk every single time I put my helmet on and go out there on the field. So whatever risk I may assume in the midst of all of this, I'm ready to assume it. I want to do it. And that's just some of where they're coming from here. And so when some wonder, okay, are there going to be players and families of players who say this risk is not worth it for me to have myself out there and to have myself on campus when maybe students aren't there? Most of the players that at least I've spoken to right now, well, they're aware of the gravity of the situation. They still want to find a way to play football this year.
Jump in here, Marcus. What do you think?
Gee, to Laura's point, and I think we had this conversation about another topic a while back. Players have this I'm the invincible tag. Like that's how we think. That's how I thought when I was in college and playing in the NFL. And man, we can play through anything. The game is really predicated in the athlete's mind over the fact that you are going to assume some risk every time you play the game. Now, obviously, this is totally different, but coming from a player's perspective, I'm not surprised one iota that the players responded to Laura like they have. Because, look, most of the time when you're in this situation in college, and Paul knows this, we've sat at a desk together for a long time, most of these guys want to go to the NFL. That's the goal. And if anything deters that, the reality is all of them won't. But for a lot of guys that we've had the opportunity to cover in the SEC, these guys want to play so they can go to the league. They want to expedite that process of getting to the next level. And I think when you start to have these conversations, that's what comes to the forefront, especially the one with Laura. The one thing I will say, though, on the late start of the season, that's when I think you'll see some players start to bow out, depending on how late possibly the season could start leading into the next season.
Thank you for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.